Hello and welcome to the Athletic Soccer Show. We're here to break down the USMNT's exit in this World Cup. 3-1 to the Netherlands in the round of 16. My name is Jack Collins and I'll be your host. I'm joined once again by the wonderful Miss Christine Cupo. How you doing, Christine?
I'm great. I'm great. That was a hell of a match. Very proud of the US men's side. I think from a fan perspective, I had hoped for better. From an analyst perspective, knew this wasn't going to be a cut and dry, easy win for the US side, but I did think that they'd give the Dutch a bit more of a run for their money. Didn't happen. We had instead of that sort of what's becoming the more normal like tale of two halves that we've seen through the group stage for the US men. We got a bit more of a wonky up and down that was even more deeply unsettling for anyone with any level of anxiety. I don't know. What did you think, Jack?
I thought it was, as you say, a good game of football, and generally the kind of momentum swung. I think for long periods, I thought that it was exactly the game that the Dutch were looking for. And there was a moment early on in the game that I texted US friend saying, "I don't like how much of the ball you've got." That for me is a real worry, because the whole thing about this game that I was kind of considering in the US having a shot and the US being able to kind of upset the odds in so many ways. And I think we probably should address that a US victory here would have been an upset of the odds, right? This
Yeah.
is the scoreline that is, or the, let's say, the outcome that is expected, right? Anything else would have been an upsetting of the apple cart. And I think it's good to remember those things when you come off the back of it, because obviously emotions are high right now. And I think that's fair. And there are certain things that we'll come on to that the US did wrong and could have done better, etc., etc. And Berhalter has questions to answer as well. But generally, when you look at these ones, I think it's important to remember that this is the expected outcome. And a 3-1 loss to the Netherlands, it's not the ideal result. Of course it's not. But equally, I think there's an element of, you look at it and go, right, this isn't an embarrassing result by any stretch of the imagination. There's nothing here that you're going, oh, that's a shambles, because this is kind of what's expected to happen. I mean, you break it down, and I think the fact that you get the first miss from Christian Pulisic, and I think it's a harder chance than maybe some are giving credit for it. It falls to him in a kind of off balance position. He's taking it with his weaker foot. The position of the goalkeeper is excellent, but the fact that then the sucker punch comes in straight away from the Netherlands, sweeping upfield and scoring a wonderful goal, one of the goals of the tournament, you look at it and go, wow, that's what happens when you don't take your chances against very, very good sides.
Yeah, I think we would have had a different story had Christian been able to actually manage to score that goal. For me, I felt like the trajectory slowly shifted from that like very confident hammering side that we saw maybe in the first 5 minutes to gradually slipping once Memphis and Dumfries did their thing in the US half. And right from the jump, the Dutch knew which spaces to exploit, and they did a good job doing it. You knew that if you weren't able to shut down sort of that deep run down the wing and then those cutbacks, at least I saw it. And quite frankly, as a midfielder, I've been demoralized by that exact same thing. So I can empathize, but like I might have a little bit of like baller PTSD. So it's like once you get frustrated like that and they start stretching you, where it's like you're creating communication issues and you're opening up the holes that you exactly think that you're going to get. I mean, it's very difficult. And so I think that kind of set them spinning a bit. With that being said, I think that LVG tactically set out to play a match that he expected of a young, fast side that would rely on their speed. And even that wasn't the US's strength today. They seemed a lot slower, a lot more flat footed than they usually are. The confidence, the composure, the experience of that Netherlands side, it took over. Like once they started realizing, like, hey, we can just keep moving the ball like this, it's okay. But until we got that halftime change where we saw a little bit more invigoration, because they entirely neutralized Jesus Ferreira, who I like a lot, but essentially he was just an extra body on the pitch for the whole first half.
I like Ferreira too, but I think there is an element today where you could see how raw he is still. And there are moments, obviously, for rawness, and there are moments against a really technically able Dutch side that you're not looking for that. You're looking for that moment of quality in the final third. And actually, there was a couple of deliveries into the box where he wasn't attacking the front post. Now, this isn't a personal criticism. There's been lots of this as World Cup, but just those moments you go, someone experienced who knows that ball is not getting past a brick wall Dutch line. You need to attack the front post if you're going to cause some chaos. And there was a little bit of that kind of hanging back to be like, oh, maybe it will go past the first man. That's never going to happen in a situation like this. And I think that taking him off was the right decision. I was interested with where he went with kind of false nine in inverted commas, because obviously that term is incredibly overused. But we look at it and you think how the US were going to try and do things, and it was going to be trying to stretch and trying to get in behind, and they were the moments where problems were caused. I think when you look at it, there was a lot of the game played in front of the Netherlands. When there was that kind of moment where it would be knocking around the US, sort of looking for those opportunities. There was a lot of narrow central stuff, which I suppose is kind of a relation to that 5 at the back formation that they utilized to such good use today. But it was kind of like, I don't think you want to be going down the channels here. I think you need to be overlapping your fullbacks, getting into those areas to cause problems. And it never really happened. And then suddenly the US would lose the ball, and the Dutch were like, well, that's our game. Thanks very much. It was, it was kind of bread and butter for them.
They got outplayed. They really did, because they're even able to sort of exploit when, the US were in possession and you'd have Anthony Robinson coming down the flank, which has worked previously. It's like just that urgency to get back to the other end of the field. It's like you're leaving that back line strung wide open. It was a good match, from objectively, it was a good match. The US put in a decent fight. I think that in contrast to some of the group stage matches, got the subs mostly correct. Also timing correct, which I think was a little bit off in the priors. But Netherlands set out to do what they were going to do, and they were successful. I was surprised to see, I think, less of Frankie, less of, just lost my whole train of thought. Dumfries absolutely had a game. Yeah.
And Memphis, so did Blind. Imagine getting a goal and assist in a World Cup game as a fullback, and you're going, you're not man of the match.
Sorry, Cody. I don't know why that just totally. I think I was looking for him the whole match to be like, oh no, Cody. But like, they did a good job of essentially like neutralizing those players. It's just everyone else that ended up being, a little bit of havoc. Okay. Dumfries, like, they're a good squad, like I understand that, like, Thursday they had no training because of flu symptoms, but now I'm like, was that fake, guys? Who had the flu? Where?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've got a couple of comments here. Samuel says we just got out coached, which I think is fair. LVG played the game that he was trying to play, and I think that worked. And then Martin says unlucky today. Netherlands really just sat back and countered. If Pulisic had taken that early chance, it would have been a very different game. And I think this is spot on, right? And you kind of mentioned it.
I don't disagree. I mean,
if the first goal was so important today.
We already kind of covered. Yeah, I think we're all commiserating collectively in that. I think unfortunately the US didn't get out front, and that probably would have changed things a bit. But also, Netherlands again much better in the final third than the US, which we've now seen over and over and over and over and over and over again. Like, at which point, I kind of laughed that the goal that did finally come to fruition was like so silly goofy. Like, it wasn't the one that is guaranteed, and I feel like that's what that squad tends to look for. And unfortunately, you're never going to have that perfect ball, perfect goal scenario every single time. And they just want to like casually dribble into the box. And it's not, when you don't have a shooter and you're not playing like that, it's abysmal. I think they were probably better off at that point, ripping shots and trying to play the ricochet, like do the best that you can do. But even then it's like when they got the shots off, Weah getting that shot off, and then you actually pan back and see that everyone's just standing there in the box. Like nobody's like, looks like they're ready to move anywhere. It's like, what's happening? What's transpiring this match that we haven't seen? Because I feel like some of the grit that they had just vanished. And I'm like, I get it. It's hard when you're playing from behind and it's a little bit demoralizing and you're all probably exhausted, but they got outplayed on field and they got out strategized off field. So like, I mean, they still put in a good fight. I don't think that it's anything to bat an eyelash at. I think that this is all positive momentum, that as they move toward 2026, it solidifies a lot of their spots in understanding who needs to be doing what. But I also think that they need to really re-explore the situation of striking, who's scoring, shooting, set pieces, things like that, that were kind of exposed this tournament. And I know, people want to complain about a lot of things. We finally got to see Gio for probably the amount of time we'd expect to see him in a match. Effective. I don't really think that I'd take anything away from him. I think that he did his best in the situations as they unfolded.
Yeah.
But I think if we probably would have made some moves earlier on, I probably would have put Aronson on earlier. I think that's my only.
Yeah, I mean, he comes on at 67, obviously. That there are those changes at halftime to try and shift the balance of it. I don't think Berhalter got everything wrong today, but I think there were a couple of moments that you look at when you are looking at shifting the balance of a game. I thought Musa was relatively anonymous, and I know he's been brilliant all tournament. But equally, you look at these and think, well, how does this work? There's also an element of you bring on Haji Wright, and that is the kind of game, as you say, where you're looking at ricochets, chaos, things in the moment. And the goal obviously comes from one of those moments of like absolute madness. But you look at that and you go, who would I have wanted to throw on in that second half? And the answer is Jordan Pefok. That's who I'd want to throw on in that second half, to be like,
I don't
just rough them up a
disagree.
bit and see if we can get some spills.
I think isolated to just this particular World Cup and play, I'm not 100% keen on Haji in that role. I need somebody with more speed, more teeth, more whatever. I need more from that role. And then I think today was a really atypical performance from what I saw for Musa. Even early on when the US were still largely in possession, some of these like one toucher passes that were like no look or otherwise, that's like, you're playing the Netherlands. They are going to try to neutralize our midfield because they know that is our strongest bit on that pitch. You can't afford that, because that is exactly where you're going to hand them the ball, and it's going to be lethal as they head to our goal. I think that's where I got a little bit frustrated with him. Like, pick your head up, take a touch, look at where you're going. Like simple things that he's done really well without issue previously. That's like, why today? Why? Which side of the bed did you wake up on? What side, please?
Yeah. I mean, but also you're playing a midfield of this quality. Obviously, things are going to be difficult, and I think that's always a point to kind of think about and look at. And there are changes. I thought the midfield shape was a little bit out, and it's been such a strength, as you say, for the entire thing. But to be pulled apart like that, the press for the first goal is a little bit worrying. The way that everyone, it was 3 simple passes and the press was played through, and suddenly you're looking at this team steaming forward, and we know that Dumfries is going to do that because that's his entire game book. And the question marks over Anthony Robinson's defending for the third goal are going to be there, because you can't leave Denzel Dumfries free at the back post. The man thinks he's a 9. Like he thinks he's a 9 for Inter. He thinks he's a 9 for the Netherlands. I've never seen a fullback like this.
He's setting out to try to prove it at every turn. You can't give him that space. You're absolutely right. He does the same stuff in Serie A, where you're like, sir, are you trying out every single match? Like what's happening? But he's a threat.
Yeah. I mean, and always has been. There's an interesting comment here from Ethan. He says, I wanted Aronson and Reina for Zimmerman and Ferreira at the half. Drop Tyler to centre back and go for a double pivot with Wes and Musa. And I didn't think Zimmerman was great today. I completely agree with that. And actually, the change to take Cameron Carter-Vickers out and put Zimmerman back in was a bold call, and one that I don't think has hugely paid off. But I don't know if I would have,
unless he would have scored that bite, and then he would have been the hero of the match. Okay.
I mean, it would have been one of those moments. And there were moments at 2-1 where you thought, oh, okay, maybe it's on. And there is that element of emotion about it. And you go, right, okay, well, the US have tails up, it's flying forward, and then it's another really simple goal for the third, and it kind of takes all the wind out the sails.
Yeah. No, I feel like I'm not as negative on Zimmerman as some people are, but I think that with CCV doing what he had done last match, there was confidence. And so I think I could have gone either way. I just think that Netherlands knew what they were doing. They really did. Like the amount of composure, um, brutal. Like in retrospect, like obviously not a poor performance, but also just like remarkably played by Netherlands. Like they deserve their flowers. And I hope that, I don't know, they go further in the tournament. I hope that Australia beat Argentina. I hope there's major upsets as we go, just for pure chaos. But
well, we've seen some Argentina, we've seen Australian love in the comments already, and I know everyone's going to back the upset generally, I think, across these games. Although I think there is a real romance in the whole Lionel Messi story, so I'm gonna remain neutral, at least on that one. Samuel puts up one last question. Yeah, he says, "Is it possible that the MA midfield were tired from playing hard prior 3 games?" And look, the games have come thick and fast, and maybe this is a point worth bringing up. Before we call this to a halt, is the fact that ultimately we're looking at them, and they've had 3 brilliant games as a 3. The games come thick and fast in this tournament. We know that Weston was coming back from an injury prior to the tournament. We've seen Tyler Adams have a really physical, demanding season at Leeds in the Premier League so far. And Musa's been playing regularly as well for Valencia. It did just look a little bit like it started to get on top of them. And I don't really mean that as a negative way. It's just the way that these tournament works. And actually, a lot of teams are able to rotate their midfield. You saw Louis van Gaal do it at half time, right? Koopmeiners comes on for Tyrone. They're the kind of changes you make if you have that depth of squad.
The benefit of depth.
There's no one really behind the 3.
Yeah. No, I'm certain that they were all tired. I think that they're all warriors and they'd fight through. I mean, you also have kind of a nicked up Pulisic. Like, yes, he played. I'm sure he still has pain. It's not like that's not a regular thing for most players. If you can play through it, people opt to. But yeah, I'm sure they're exhausted. This was like this stretch was probably the most rest they've had this entire tournament between the group stage and here. It's unfortunate. It's what happens, right? Wear and tear, and then whomever has the most depth and the best rotations ends up kind of triumphing tactically.
Yeah, I think that's it. And I think that's the kind of overarching theme of all of it, but out tacticked by Louis van Gaal. Now that's not there's
which
no
is not, that's not
Gaal's
even a knock. It's like Louis van Gaal, like who's good? I mean, if you're going to go out, there are worser ways to go about it. There's absolutely nothing to be embarrassed by that. Like, I mean, that's tactics, literally gold star level.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm excited to see how Louis van Gaal gets treated by the media, because he's a wonderful character, and the game is always richer for having him in there. And Martin says, I don't count a back 5 counterattack as being outcoached, but I actually kind of do, because it neutralized, as you said earlier, the entire way that the US tried to play. It meant that they tried to go narrow. They funneled it through the midfield and then blocked it off in terms of the way it is.
I mean, if you're cutting off all of the avenues in the back there, like that's how you neutralize a squad, especially one that wants to use speed over all else, because you have the bodies to stack, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, I completely agree. But I think it's right in the idea that if the US score first, then Van Gaal has to change this, and therefore maybe you see a different side to that coaching. But in terms of he played the way that he needed to play to win the game, and ultimately that's what tactics is. Ultimately, that's what you're looking for.
Yeah,
you're looking for a coach to play the game.
That's your roadmap, right? Like be nimble.
Yeah, exactly. Be able to kill the strengths of your opposition and win it out. But with that, Christine, I think we're probably going to call this to a halt and let people's frustrations, I think, seep out quietly over the course of the day. It does feel like that. Does feel like that. All that's left for me to do is say thank you so much to everyone for listening and watching here on the Athletic Soccer Show. Thank you so much to Christine Cupo as ever.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a great stretch. Until the next time.
We've had a lot of fun. Until the next time, I've been Jack Collins. This has been the Athletic Soccer Show post-game review at the World Cup. Thank you for tuning in as ever, and we'll see you soon.